Hi, and welcome to another CityStates Medieval video. Last time, we covered the city building progress so far. We just took a look at some basic buildings and population management, but as previously mentioned, we wanted to take a separate look at some of our more complex buildings and how they interact with each other, and the decisions that you as a player will have to make along the way. But before we start, as always, please keep in mind that this is an early developer build and doesn't fully represent the final product. So although we've made a lot of progress with balancing, you can still expect some changes in the final release. So how do we actually get to the point in making gear? Well, much like crafting in the real world, we need to follow a process, and if we want to do this ourselves without trading for resources from other players, we're going to need the following. Raw resources, such as iron or wood, which we can obtain using mines or the forester. Refined resources, which will take our raw materials, such as the iron, and using the smelter, we can turn these into iron bars. And finally, we're going to need to use a forge to turn these into our weapons. With that said, let's take a look at our current city. So, for the purpose of this video, I've set up a little industrial hub in my city over here. And I've tried to include everything that I think I'm going to need for the purpose of this video. And I've kind of positioned them in a way that shows the order of which we're going to be using them. So, on the left here, you can see we've got our mine and forester. Then at the top right, we've got our smelter, and then finally at the bottom below that, our forge. And this is going to be a perfect example of kind of how you approach actually going about things. So right now I'm going to collect these resources here, and I have got dev tools on my side to speed things up, but we're going to go into our forge. If you didn't see it, we did discuss kind of the basic mines and stuff and getting resources in the previous video, so if you haven't seen that, make sure to check it out on the channel. But right now we're going to jump into here. And the smelter's job is to turn our raw resources into usable materials to actually craft. But you've also got to keep in mind that once you've actually gathered these raw resources, you may not need to actually smelt. You might have enough spare resources to actually sell on the market and then buy these. But for the purpose of this video, we're just going to actually make them. So let's get some iron bars going, and we can see here that this is going to take us 3 iron ore and 1 coal to make an iron bar. And we're going to go ahead and let's just put 20 in for now, and we'll set that. Now, this is going to take 5 minutes and 35 seconds right now anyway with the current balances. However, you've got to keep in mind that I've actually got 5 villagers working on here, which has drastically sped this up. If I was to remove these villagers, you can see it's actually taking 30 minutes and 45 seconds to produce just 1. So if you're really wanting to focus on production, like say in your smelter or something, it might be an idea to temporarily take workers out of your forester, for example, and actually bring them into this. We did kind of discuss this a lot in the previous video, so I won't go on about it too much, but it's a good example of a time where you might want to focus production in a certain element to get stuff going quicker. Particularly if you're like me and you want to really jump onto the battlefield. If you know anything about me, you'll know that I love the PvP in CityStates Medieval, so it's going to be one of the things I'm going to be rushing. We're going to use the dev tools just to add a cheeky little hour here, and this is going to speed up. And we should see these coming in rather soon. And much like our other resource buildings, once the hour is passed, we should see some resources hanging over us here. So there we go. We've got 10 iron bars. And that's basically it for the smelter. It's fairly straightforward. At this point now, you're going to have to make a decision. Right now, when we're starting, we're not going to have any weapons or anything. So as far as I'm concerned, it's a priority to actually get our squads, our armies, geared up. And then maybe once you've got your squad geared up and you're actually dominating other people's armies, you may be in a situation where you don't actually need to build these gears anymore because you're going to be taking them from other players. So at this point, later on in the game, you might consider actually selling these bars to players who don't want to spend the time or don't have the resources to actually make these but want to advance quicker in a different area. So this is where you'd kind of have an option to actually put stuff on the market. But anyway, we're going to go into our forge, and this is my favorite building, I think. Well, maybe next to the brewery. I am quite fond of that one as well. And as you can see, I've got 10 workers going on in this. I'm going to take a few away for now. And let's have a look. So there's 2 things to note here. One are the squads. You probably recognize these if you follow the beta, and there's a little goodie bag at the end, and you're probably curious about that. The goodie bag is actually the tools, and in our previous video we spoke about these. So tools are given to workers when they say work on a farm or work in a forester, and when you assign them you need to do an initial lump sum, but then you also need to supply them with tools over time as these break. So this is a very, very important resource, and one that we're going to actually need quite a lot of if we want to sustain a big city. So I'm going to set 50 of these, and you can see it's going to take 2 minutes. Thankfully, they're relatively cheap to build. You can see for the 50, it's costing me 25 wood and 10 iron ore. And once again, I think we're going to jump into our dev tools here, and we'll just add an hour to this. And we should see this tick up in a second. And if you've been watching the food icon at the top here, you'll probably notice that this is going down pretty quickly. This is because I've kind of I haven't built very well because I've been building for the purpose of this video. So I don't have any farms sustaining food, but you can kind of see that this is something that you're going to need to address, because if you don't have the food, you're not going to be able to pay your workers, and you're not going to end up with a very good city. So don't rush this like I have, if it's even possible without the dev tools. But let's pick these up anyway. You'll also notice actually that this bar up here now is a lot shorter. I think the devs are trying to remove a bit of the clutter, so we've got our core 3 resources here, and then when we hit the plus you can see all our other stuff there. So there's our tools. When we grab these iron bars, we do have 510. That should go up to 520. There you go. And now let's get into the real juicy stuff here. So say we've produced these, but suddenly we go, oh, I want a battle. I want a battle. So we can actually go back in here and we can stop production, and that's going to reset that there. And now we can go in and actually get some weapons going. So my favorite units are the dual wielders, so I'm going to showcase these. And if you were following the beta, you'll probably know that these can use clubs and they can also use daggers. So I'm actually going to go into the daggers, and I believe a dual wield squad is somewhere around 8 to 10 units in a squad, which means we're going to need, say, 8 or 10 separate daggers to equip them with. So let's just do 8 for now, and we can see it's going to cost us 80 wood, 10 wood per dagger, and it's going to take 23 minutes with our current workers. So that's okay. I'm actually going to add a few more because I want to rush this, and we can see this is going down a little bit. So there we go, 1 minute 28 looks like a pretty good time for this. And I will use the dev tools once again to skip forward an hour. And we should see these come in. And that's basically it. So we do have the forge working, we do have the smelter working. And where are these? Are these... Oh yeah, so I've made 8 of them here. Okay, so these you go in and collect. It's a little bit more like the farms. So let's grab these here. And there we go. So yeah, as I said, that's basically it. It's the forge and smelter are working. There's obviously going to be a lot more recipes added to this as we go along, but the fundamentals are there. And if you're wondering, this is more of a mid game. I wouldn't say incredibly late, but it's not early. I had to get my castle, I think it was currently up to about level 11 to give you an idea, to get access to some of these buildings. And things like the forge itself, you'll actually find that when you start out, you'll only actually have access to, say, if we go back out of this, you'll start off with only access to the melee, and then as you upgrade it, you'll then get access to the ranged units, and then the dual wield, and then finally the two-hander. So there's a kind of reason to progress your buildings there as well. And you're going to have to make a lot of decisions, because while this is going on, you're going to want to get your population up, you're going to want to make sure you've got a good food production. So all in all, this is going to kind of branch off, and this is where players are going to be focusing on different elements of the game and actually selling the abundance of resources that they are producing in order to kind of get shortcuts into getting these other resources. We hope you've enjoyed seeing our smelter and forge in action, and now have a better idea of how different buildings in CityStates Medieval support each other. We will of course be covering more buildings in future videos, but for now, as always, if you have any questions or want to learn more, please check the video's description and join us on Discord. Take care until next time, guys.